All right, to this, the National Hospital Network is appealing to government to tackle the ongoing public unrest and looting because of their devastating impact on the medical community. The NHN says that hospitals are facing quite extreme staff shortages and some health workers have been forced to sleep at the hospitals, and food supplies are also slowly running out. Now, Neil Nair from the National Hospital Network joins us this morning to tell us more. Neil, just paint that picture for us, because you work in these hospitals. You see what is going on just in terms of how the public healthcare workers are affected. Also, that value chain of also receiving food and making sure medication is on time for your patients. How's it looking?
Good morning to Mela, and good morning to all. I think, perhaps before I share some experiences from our hospitals on the ground, I think it's important that we also just contextualize that we strongly believe that the biggest threat to our safety and security rests with the unacceptable levels of poverty and also the unacceptable gaps between the haves and the have-nots in South Africa, and that until these situations are seriously addressed by our government and other organs of society, that we will always be sitting on a ticking bomb. I think just to contextualize the NHN, our hospitals, if one looks at the provinces in question, in Gauteng, the NHN has 69 hospitals, 17 of which are acute hospitals. In KwaZulu-Natal, we have 38 hospitals, and 19 of which are acute hospitals. The NHN is made up predominantly of independent private hospitals, and our hospitals are located largely in historically disadvantaged communities. So we are at the coalface of what's happening at the moment.
Right. Well, we have to leave it there, unfortunately, due to some of the live events we're seeing there in Durban. Neil Nair, apologies for that, but let's move to Durban now and give you that aerial view coming from Dasen. Gareth?
All right, Dasen Thathiah, hello again to you. You've been up in the air for the last 15 minutes, joining us live from these burnt-out areas in Durban. Dasen, let's come back to you. Tell us where you are. Viewers just joining us, we can see the factories, but tell us geographically, where are you over in Durban at the moment?
Gareth, this is of particular interest, what you're looking at now. So, this is the scene, or the aerial view, of the warehouse that you would have seen at the center of attention in media reports, where mass looting was taking place over the past few days, people leaving with all of these items that they could on anything. Now, there are a few things that I want to tell you about this. One is that there are also trucks around this industrial area. What that meant was that the looting, the theft, the stealing from this warehouse by mass discounters extended to the theft of trucks. People were stealing trucks. In fact, there's one abandoned over there. People were stealing trucks to load these trucks and then take all of these goods out. Now, there's another important point to make here. The road that you're looking at now also leads through some of the residential areas on either end. And to tie in with what I told you earlier on, of some of these communities forming roadblocks, they were then, in some cases, able to stop trucks that they established were stolen and then call in the police to assist there. We saw that the other day. There's another more dangerous side to that. In the center of this, unfortunately a lot of it has cleared out now, was something of a distribution hub. So the criminals would then have the items brought out of the warehouse, so there would be the looting taking place. It would come out, and then transportation would have to be arranged. Those that were there in that so-called hub were guarding it with their lives. We were in the midst of a shootout the other night when security officials were on the one side and those that were guarding these stolen goods were on the opposite end. Gunfire rang out in the night. There were such close calls where we could hear bullets passing us extremely close on the left and right. It sounded like they were armed with rifles. It was a very dangerous situation to be in. In fact, over the cover, or rather under the cover of darkness, that's when the criminals had the advantage. So yesterday, and I think that's part of the reason why it's a little quieter now, and all you're seeing is just absolute mayhem down here. You're seeing the remains of what the past few days were like, the aftermath, the trucks, looking like a war zone. And part of the reason is because yesterday we saw that the SANDF did move in, police were a lot more active, and that's how things managed to finally get a bit quieter. There's also a good side to this. There's a positive side, and I think it'll take a while before we see it and a while before we can get to focus on that. But communities are also starting to get together and try, it's a mammoth task, Gareth, but they're going to try to have little cleanup operations where they can. And I think that's something that needs to be commended.
It does, and I think we've seen a lot of those photos, a lot of those videos on social media, whether it's small communities, gated communities, NGOs, now having to come together to try and do what they can. But in the end, Dasen, this should never have been happening in the first place as well. You touched on it a moment ago about how it does seem to have settled down a little bit as you fly away from that burnt-out warehouse. What are you hearing? You've got your ears to the ground as well. What are you hearing as far as any other potential threats in KZN, in Durban as well? And then while you're talking to me, I'd like to get your thoughts, Dasen, on the situation in Phoenix, where we saw the looting, but now there seems to also be, Dasen, isn't there, a case of community infighting. Take me through that as we take another loop around that warehouse.
Yeah, that's the bigger issue here, right? So beyond the looting, I mean, you look at that, you see the fire engines still out here, firefighters still working, beyond the immediate impact and beyond the immediate devastation. I've been thinking about this quite a bit and discussing it with colleagues as well, that there's all of these other aspects and other facets to this. You touched on the one now, the vigilantism, the racism that is rearing its head. I mean, before we get to the Phoenix issue, there are some communities around Durban North where we've received reports of others from neighboring communities being shut out. So we're talking about racial tensions, and that's how it's being fueled. So the community will tell you on the one end, that we don't want anyone else other than those that live here to benefit from the supermarkets that are operating right now, because supplies are short and there is no definite date as to when they are going to get new supplies. So that's why they want to accommodate those in that area. For those that are then in neighboring communities and then trying to get in there, for them it's reminiscent of the days of apartheid. They feel like they can't get in there. So that's the one issue. The other issue is that there's a sense, like in Phoenix, where we've spoken to both communities. The community that is accusing residents in Phoenix of racism, and we've spoken to those in Phoenix about it as well. So let me start with Zwelisha. That is one of the communities that's affected there. When we went in there last night, they claim that the residents in the neighboring community of Phoenix are attacking black people at will. So they feel that if those that are driving in a car, they don't care, that they are just trying to return home. They have nothing to do with the looting, and yet they are coming under attack. That is their version. If you go into Phoenix, they say that their area is being used as a route to transport stolen goods. They also would tell you that no innocent person has been killed there. You would understand now the difficulty in dealing with this issue, because it's always ever going to be two sides to a story. People are not always on the ground. Police are not always there. Reporting crews are also coming under fire for not necessarily, taking a stance on this. But it is difficult because we don't live in those communities, Gareth. Now, what that tells me is that it's a time for leadership. Yes, we did see the Amazulu King yesterday touching on the racial tensions. We saw the Premier. But you have to ask yourself, is that enough? Do our leaders not need to be in these communities now in advance before things escalate to levels worse than what we've seen? Reports of 15 people dead in Phoenix, Gareth, that's not something to take lightly. Reports of about 26 people dead in the province so far. Right now, those numbers are set to increase. The Premier himself has said that. Those are very preliminary figures, that 26. it is time to act now if it's not too late already. We need leadership, Gareth.
And talk to me about that leadership. We're hearing that we've seen Sihle Zikalala down on the ground as well. We've also had the police minister as well. Do we know if they're going to be going out to these kinds of areas that you're talking about right now, not just the carnage and the skeleton of those sort of warehouses, but to the communities who are now fearing for their livelihoods, fearing for infighting, fearing for a lack of basic necessities and a fearing of fuel as well? Do we know yet, Dasen, if we're expecting those, that leadership, as you say, those authorities, to come down to the communities?
Yeah. So fortunately, we have heard from the police minister. He's already been on the ground in addition to our premier as well as the provincial executive community. So they've been trying to cover some of the areas. Yesterday, they were predominantly in the business areas. I know that late last night, Police Minister Behitele was out on Montclair or waiting inside. That's what he was doing yesterday. He was talking to communities, and today we do understand, we are waiting for a confirmation though, that he may be going into Phoenix, exactly the area that I'm talking about. I hope that that is going to quell the violence there, the tensions that are brewing. We hope that there will be a lasting solution that is given to that community. Gareth, let me just quickly talk to the visuals that you're seeing now. We are taking you over the Springfield Park area. So these are two malls opposite each other that were set alight the other day. Fortunately, it looks a lot different, a lot quieter, but I guess you can't get away from what I spoke to you and to Melo about earlier on. You know, the carcasses that are left here, the skeletons of these buildings, the burnt-out buildings that are symbolic of all of the livelihoods that have been completely ripped away. Beyond the instant gratification of those that are looting, they've also broken an economy in the process. The damage here, in the billions, Gareth, not even the millions. And again, preliminary estimates. Step out of this for a second and think about the broader picture. The warehouses here, the international companies like LG and Samsung that have come to our city, and where these items are being manufactured, being stored, and now they've ground to a halt. So it doesn't just affect Durban, and it doesn't just affect KwaZulu-Natal. It affects you there in Johannesburg. Yeah. It affects our counterparts in other provinces, because these are some of the products that are going to get to you. What happens when people in Durban need to buy something as simple as a TV, a washing machine? I mean, are these the considerations these are the considerations that we need to have. This is what it means for you and I in the next weeks, in the next months. It means if your fridge is broken, you can't simply go down to the macro. You can't go down to the game, because there's no stock. And that's where we are now. The N3 is still all but blocked, closed off. It means that important trade route is not functioning right now. There are concerns over fuel supply, which for now government has reassured us is still okay. But as much as the supply is okay, you've seen the lines. Communities can't get to the garages. In instances, those garages don't want to sell fuel because they're worried about attracting any unnecessary attention, shutting down their fuel stations. There's all of this to worry about, and far beyond the action.
It's the implications of the coming weeks. It's not just the loss to the economy, but it's the loss of jobs for the people who would have contributed to the economy as well. Incredible footage, tragically sad footage, and incredible updates and reporting from Dasen Thathiah and our team in the sky above Durban, above Phoenix, taking us to all those areas, how different it looks when the sun is up as well. It gives you a real perspective of just the kind of carnage, billions of rands worth of damage just in KZN alone.